Welcome back, humanity. Welcome back to the We Are Not Lonely podcast. It's time to learn something. So, the last time I was here, I did promise that we were going to do a whole series on spirituality. Not spirituality per se. Give me a second while I adjust myself to get comfortable. Not spirituality, but topics about the Shastras. And, well, here I am. Welcome back. It's going to be a little different because there's a certain procedure that must be followed when talking about such topics. And I'm going to be doing my best to follow what I have learned from my teachers. Alright? Generally, we begin with a series of prayers. So, what I'm going to be doing today is I'm going to start with the prayers. And immediately after that, I'm going to be giving you a basic explanation of each of those prayers, the mantras and what they mean. The mantras and shlokas and what they mean. Alright, so without further ado, let's get the first ever cult meeting. Sorry about that, I have to throw in my stupid joke every once in a while. But let's get it started, yeah. Om Asatoma Sadgamaya Tamasoma Jyotirgamaya Mrityorma Amritam Gamaya Om Shanti Shanti Shantihi Om Sahana Vavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavaditamastu Mavidvishavahai Om Shanti Shanti Shantihi Om Ishvaro Gururartmeti Murti Bheda Vibhagine Vyomavad Vyapta Dehaya Dakshina Murtaye Namaha Om Sadashiva Samarambam Shankaracharya Madhyamam Asmadacharya Paryantam Vande Guru Paramparam. Okay, so let me just start off with an explanation, a brief explanation about each of those mantras and shlokas. So the first one was Asatoma Sadgamaya. Some of y'all might know this. I'm gonna go ahead and presume that you don't, and I'm just gonna be explaining everything I speak about because it's better to err on the side of caution. This is a medium where there's no feedback from the other side except in the form of comments. So I'm just gonna err on the side of caution, right? So Asatoma Sadgamaya, lead us from untruth, Asat, to Sat. Tamasoma Jyotirgamaya, lead us from darkness to light. Mrityorma Amritam Gamaya, lead us from death to immortality. Peace, peace, peace. That's the first prayer. And there's a depth of meaning to this. This is just one of the many mantras found in the Vedas, which is actually the topic of today. I'm going to be touching upon the Vedas. I'll be stopping shortly after because I have a slight health issue. I have a bit of a cough and I don't want to push myself too hard. That's one of the reasons the podcast is a little late. I apologize. The second set of mantras, Om Sahana Vavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavaditamastu Mavidvishavahai Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Now, that is basically chanted before classes, before especially Vedantic classes. This is one of the chants that this is one of the mantras that my Acharya Srinivasanji chants before beginning. Actually, the next three mantras are what we chant before every Vedanta class that I've been attending for the past 2 years. And Sahana Vavatu is essentially to ensure that there's no disagreement between the student and teacher and that whatever is communicated without any blocks. Alright? That's the basic crux of what that mantra means. Om Ishvaro Gururartmeti Murti Bheda Vibhagine Vyomavad Vyapta Dehaya Dakshina Murtaye Namaha. Now this next shloka, because it doesn't really appear in the Vedas and only that which appears in the Vedas are technically mantras. I will explain all of this going forward, what each of these technical terms mean. There will be several classes, like podcast episodes dedicated purely to exploring what each of these Sanskrit terms mean, because honestly, a lot of these Sanskrit terms are non translatable. You cannot use an English word in place of things like mantra or japa. You can't. It's literally untranslatable. You can't get the crux of it in any other language except Sanskrit. And maybe the Indian languages. But then again, most of the Indian languages are derived from Sanskrit. So anyway, Ishvaro Guru Ratmeti, it's a shloka found in the Dakshinamurti Stotram, which is actually the epitome. It's the final study. It's like doing a post PhD in Vedantic studies. It contains the crux of all Vedantic knowledge, and it is dedicated to the form of Dakshinamurti, the south-facing form of Lord Shiva in the form of a teacher. This is beautiful Dakshinamurti Stotram that I would suggest everybody to listen to. It's one of my favorite. It brings a great deal of peace of mind to me whenever I listen to it. Basically, it praises the form of Dakshinamurti that is Shiva in the form of a teacher. Alright? And the final mantra is Om Sadashiva Samarambham Shankaracharya Madhyamam Asmadacharya Pariyantam Vande Guru Parampara. I'm going to explain that line by line because this is particularly important whenever we talk about the parampara or the sampradaya. Why is it so important, and why is it that you find in the Vedic line of teaching, of thought, of spirituality that you find this whole thing about sampradaya being so important? It's because they don't want Kapola Kalpitam. Let me explain that. A lot of so-called spiritual people in this modern day and age are going around deceiving the masses, just using their so-called spirituality as a method to gain wealth. Now, the Shastras have mentioned that certain things like this could happen, and if you misuse your knowledge for such things, there will be repercussions. But these people are going ahead and doing it anyway. The thing is, it's all a symptom of this time that we're living in, this Kali Yuga. And I'm surprised it's taken me so long to get to this, because this is like my pet topic, dude. I have been doing intense research on this particular topic for a very long time, right? Well, I suppose it's not much of a, shall we say, an exaggeration to say that pretty much my entire life has been leading to this particular moment. Right. So, moving on. Sadashiva Samarambham. Where does this begin with? It begins with Sadashiva. Sadashiva Samarambham Shankaracharya Madhyamam. In the middle there was Adi Shankaracharya. Asmadacharya Pariyantam, until the present Guru who's teaching right now, and I suppose if you're listening to this, that would be me. Asmadacharya would be me. To me, Asmadacharya is Srinivasanji, the one who's teaching me Vedanta. Asmadacharya Pariyantam Vande Guru Parampara. This is the lineage that this knowledge has passed through. We will discuss the implications of this kind of a chant later, but I just wanted to make sure that you'll understand the significance of each of the things that we do. Alright? So that's the explanation of the above mantras and shlokas. So moving on, who am I? How am I qualified to speak about such topics, such deep topics? Excuse me. Ever since my Brahma Upadesham back in 2012, where I was initiated onto this particular path, I've been studying in one way or another about the Shastras. Although, to be fair, my in-depth study started after I completed my MBA post 2018, right? So I have a decent amount of exposure in this particular topic. I have studied the Vedas. I have studied the Tantras a little bit. I have studied Advaita Vedanta, that is the Shankara Bhashyam, Jyotishya, Samskritam, Samskrita Bhashaha. I have studied all of these things on and off. And I have had multiple teachers, multiple people guiding me in each of these. All right, so Tantra, I've been studying it since 2012 on and off through the guidance of a very good guide of mine, Samudgata Swamiji. The Veda Parayanam I learnt post 2018, sometime in August. I've been learning this from Varadasiman Mama, who is in from the Parakal Mata, I believe he's affiliated to them, right? I've been studying Advaita Vedanta since 2020, incidentally, just as my Sadi Sati began, thankfully, and just as, like, the pandemic and the whole pandemic situation took over. So that I've been studying under the tutelage of Srinivasanji, who was studying under, I believe, Dayanand Saraswati Swamiji, right? And Jyotishya, I've been studying under Bharatiya Vidya Bhavan and its wide array of really talented teachers. I was inspired to take up this path after seeing Dr. Partha. He was actually a member of the Nanjangud priestly family. I believe his family still performs pujas in the main temple as well as the Parashuram temple nearby, even today. Right? It's after I saw him in action that I was inspired to learn this entire thing. And also my family astrologer, Kaladharan Mama, who I've been taking a lot of knowledge from. So I would like to thank all of these. And of course, for Samskrita Bhasha, I've been studying from Acharya Ganapati Bhatt. It's been going on for a while. It's going to be a lifelong process. Our basics have been completed, but I have a long way to go, I'll say that much. Alright. So, why this and why now? Right? That's a whole can of worms, but you know what the hell? I'm just gonna go ahead and open this up, right? So, I mean, it's pretty obvious that I'm from India. I think I've given away a decent amount of information. I know my man Leo's gonna be a little mad about this entire thing, but I'm gonna have to say that I'm not whitewashing, I'm not culturally appropriating, whatever that means. And it's always white people who get mad for some reason. The thing is, why do I talk so much about India? It's because it's this huge melting pot of cultures and of faiths, right? The differences among the people from north to south, from east to west, are so vast that certain rather irresponsible individuals in the public sphere, let's say that, have gone so far to claim that there's no common unifying thread tying all of our cultural identities together, that we are not one nation, that we were never one nation, we did not have a shared idea, and that it was a shared unifying idea of consciousness, and that it was the conquest of the Mughals and the British that have unified us as a diaspora, right? I'm here to put forward the position that this is not true. This is blatantly false. Lies, right? I'm just going to touch upon this for a little bit, right? Even in our Sankalpa, we have this whole thing where we say Bharatavarshe, Bharatakande, Bharatavarshe, all that, right? It goes ages back. It's there in our language. The concept of Bharatavarsha, it goes beyond, shall we say, what we call today a nation state, one with rigid borders and an identity enforced by a flag and a government. Let me just say that we were more of a civilization, all right? From what we know, the Indic civilization, the Vedic civilization stretched really far away, like even all the way to Kandahar in what is now present-day Afghanistan. For example, Gandhari was from Kandahar. Gandhari, I don't know if I probably butchered the pronunciation there, which is really sad considering the fact that I am on my way to becoming a Sanskrit scholar. But yeah, the point I'm trying to make is that all of these were once part of like a common civilization. There were intermarriages, for example, between Gandhari and Dhritarashtra, the blind king, the father of the Kauravas, which I will get to. I'm jumping the gun, but I just want you to know that there's this entire ocean of knowledge that we're going to be delving into, right? And I'm doing my best to stay on track. I've got notes, but you know me, I like to jump about. The monkey brain's got a monkey brain. Right. So, let me just say that I think it's beyond a doubt that India is like what the Vedic civilization is one of the oldest surviving civilizations today that we know of. Alright? And we have historical evidence for this. At one point of time, there was this river called the River Saraswati, and what is now called the Indus Valley Civilization was technically the Saraswati Valley Civilization. And for a very long time, Indians were mocked and degraded for bringing about this idea until satellite imagery showed the evidence of a dead river, which was also mentioned in our Shastras. Right. You know, the towns of Mohenjo-daro, Harappa, all of these ancient cities. But I digress, that's not the point. The point of this series of episodes is to shed light upon some of our Shastras. Some of the Shastras of this amazing civilization, right? In this time and age, far too many have become complacent and willfully ignorant of the great wisdom lying just within reach, and they refuse to just reach out and take it. To be fair, I'm not blaming them for their ignorance. This is, after all, the great age of darkness, mistruth, ignorance, the Kali Yuga. But without further ado, let us move on to the Shastras. Alright. Now, I'm going to be doing my best to give you a bird's eye view of the scriptural literature available in Sanskritam to the best of my knowledge to what I've studied. Obviously, this is constantly being updated, and I will do my best to remain as true to the original nature of this. Most of this, I'm doing my best not to interject any of my own personality into any of this. I'm trying to be a very impartial record keeper at the moment. Alright. So, collectively, the vast scriptural literature available in Sanskritam is known as Shastram. Since that is a Sanskrit word, I'm going to have to define. Now, Shastram means Sashanat Trayate iti Shastraha. That which commands and teaches, that which saves the individual by commanding initially and then teaching at a later stage is called Shastra. The word Shas means both to command and to teach, and Tra means to save. So Shastra literally means that which commands, teaches and saves. Alright? So in the initial phases, it commands, obviously, in order to protect. Now, there's this interesting parallel drawn by Sri Adi Shankaracharya, where he likens the Shastras to a mother. Now, the mother has to threaten the child to get the child to behave in the initial stages. And when the child is eventually old enough to understand, the mother imparts some knowledge. All of this is being done to ensure the welfare of the child, right? Moving on. The most important Shastra is called the Veda. Alright? It's also called the Shruti, and we'll get into why it is called that in a bit. There's approximately 20,000 odd mantras in the Vedas, and initially they were technically all one, just the Veda, but there was a division, and we'll get to that when we talk about the Mahabharata in a later podcast. But just know that eventually that the Vedas were divided into 4 parts, and they are the Rig Veda, the Yajur Veda, the Sama Veda, and the Atharvana Veda. Now, the Rig Veda is composed, it contains primarily poetic or padya compositions, whereas the Yajurveda contains prose or gadya rupena mantras. The Samaveda, interestingly, it's more Gita rupena. It's actually musical, and there's this idea that all of Indian music, Carnatic music, and so on and so forth, was actually derived from the Samaveda. And the interesting part is when you chant, generally for the Samaveda, it is known as Samaganam. That is the only time that the Vedas are supposed to be sung, when it's being rendered in the Samaganam. Okay. Finally, we have the Atharvana Veda, which is a very interesting and eclectic, not eclectic, it's very interesting. It's among the most powerful. I mean, Vedas are the Vedas, but from what I've been able to gather through my little research is that the Atharvana Veda contains very powerful occult spells. Obviously, since the Kali Yuga began, that was the first thing to disappear from human knowledge. There are quite a few people who still know about the Atharvana Veda, but much has been lost. I'll say that much. Now, the word Veda is derived from the word Vid, which means to know. So essentially, the Vedas literally mean knowledge, right? And I use this particular word called mantra. Let's just say that mantras are basically only that which is found in the Vedas, right? It has to have a particular meter and all of that stuff. And the word mantras are for inquiry, analysis, and assimilation. And the definition for that would be mananat trayate iti mantraha. Only if they are of Vedic composition or they are mantra. It's really good to meditate upon mantras as well, by the way. So, now obviously, since we spoke about the Vedas and all of that, the question would arise at some sort of a point asking about what is the origin of the Vedas? Who came up with them? And I'm gonna have to go on a slight digression for this, right? And the reason I'm going to do this is because you're going to have to trust the process, believe, and eventually all will become clear. Now, there's this concept called Purusha Buddhi Dosha. Essentially, you could translate it as the limitations of the human intellect, right? The idea is that our intellect is flawed due to the limited input we get from our senses. Now, logically speaking, we have the mind and we have the intellect, and we have the input from our five senses. We get information from our eyes, ears, a little bit through the eyes, ears, nose, skin. We receive all this feedback, and all that is transmitted to the brain, which interprets it according to our past experience and our knowledge, and etc. etc. It's all data, right? So the brain is compiling data real time based on past experiences. Now, the issue with this is that our input, the means by which we perceive the world, are limited. Allow me to explain. Now, we know that this is a fact even from modern science. Each of our senses function between a certain range. There's an upper limit and there's a lower limit to this, right? For example, the human eye can see an extremely tiny portion of the entire electromagnetic spectrum, right? Specifically, it can view the visible light is what we can view is between 380 to 700 nanometers, right? And similarly, the human ear can detect sounds in a frequency between 20 hertz to 20,000 hertz or 20 kilohertz, from 20 hertz to 20,000 hertz or 20 kilohertz, right? So I can go on and list for each of the senses, but I think my point's been made. And my point is this: we have limited senses. Our senses are limited. The input that we receive is flawed. We are not seeing the full picture. essentially we're not able to perceive the vast majority of the universe. If our input is limited, then how on earth are we to understand, perceive, cognize, let alone experience infinity? Right? That makes sense. So it's at this particular point that the Vedas step in, and the question of their origins become particularly pertinent. Now, like everything else, if the Vedas had human origin, shall I say, if they were Paurishaya Pramana, right? That is, if they were a means of knowledge that came from humans, and we've already spoken about how everything that we perceive is limited and therefore subject to Purusha Buddhi Dosha. Therefore, this means that any knowledge that comes from humanity through logic, it is subject to this, because we cannot perceive anything beyond our five senses, right? We depend on the input to come up with something. Any means of knowledge that comes from humanity, aka Paurishaya Pramanam, will be subject to Purusha Buddhi Dosha. That's the essential point, right? So now we get back to the Vedas and its origin. In our culture, we do not look at the Vedas as Paurishaya Pramanam. And the interesting part is that you have a choice in whether or not you believe this. And that's the beauty of Sanatana Dharma, which is another word for everything that we talk about in the Vaidika realm. Anything that originates from things. That's the true name for this religion, so to speak. Hindu is just something that has been enforced upon us. It's a willful mistranslation, mispronunciation. It's a mispronunciation of the Sapta Sindhu. It was a geographical location that became an unfortunate reality. So now, for some reason, our faith is known as Hindu, which it isn't. We are Sanatana Dharmis, or we are Vaidikas, because we follow the Vedas mostly, right? So getting back to that, I keep digressing for some reason. I did mention that I have things planned, but maybe the real friends are the digressions we made along the way. Yeah, anyway. Like I said, in our culture, we do not look at the Vedas as Paurishaya Pramana. You are entirely free to accept or reject this, by the way. There is no lake of hellfire waiting to devour you, and you will not be cast into it just for not believing. I just thought I'd make that clear, right? The belief is that they were divine revelations from Ishvara. They were not directly given to humanity. There were certain special beings called the Rishayaha, whom the Lord revealed this great knowledge to while they were in deep contemplation of the universe, who then passed it on to their disciples and to the rest of humanity. Now, the Rishis literally heard the Vedas, which is why they're called Shruti. That is another name for the Vedas, Shruti. That means it comes from the word Shruyate, that which is heard, right? So that's the beauty of all of this. It's all kind of linked together. So the basic idea I'm getting to is that the Vedas are Apaurishaya Pramanam. They do not originate from human mind, and therefore they are not subject to Purusha Buddhi Dosha. And therefore they can talk about that which we do not know, that which we cannot experience, that which is limitless. They can talk about infinity. That's the logic. Again, I reiterate, you are completely free to accept or reject this particular notion. You just put into, depending on what you do, and it's not like it's forever, depending on your experiences, that may change. Your experiences, your level of understanding, once you know once you learn certain things and you know certain things, you might switch camp. That is, you might decide, yes, I accept the Vedas. I accept that the Vedas are a Paurashaya Pramanam. Alright? So, if you accept the Vedas as they are, in their full glory, you become part of the Astika. You become an Astika. If you do not, you're classified as Nastika. That's it. That's how simple it is. Today it's become this whole believer, non-believer. Technically, the term was to describe, do you accept the Vedas in its entirety? Yes or no. That's what it means. I don't want to bring up fools who describe Astika and Nastika as acceptance or rejection of sexual violence as the truth of the world. There's a certain individual who masquerades as a great scholar but is nothing but a mere buffoon. And it can be seen in the foolishness of his words. Then again, this is the Kali Yuga. Alright, so like I said, this is the one thing in Advaita Vedanta that you are required to accept as it is. You are requested, you have the option to believe it. You have the choice. You can either accept or deny this particular thing on belief. But you have to choose to believe this one thing, that the Vedas are Apaurashaya Pramanam. For everything else, there is a certain logic. And there's a particular process that you have to go through. It's a very long process of study. It begins with a certain text called Tattva Bodha. You have to find the right guru for all of this, but you have to study the Tattva Bodha. It's a small text that is attributed to Sri Adi Shankaracharya, after which you eventually begin by studying the Prasthanatrayam, generally the Bhagavad Gita, and then the Upanishads. And then once you're done with all of that, you get to the Brahma Sutra Bhashyam. Now, all of this is from the point of Advaita Vedanta that is done. That is the Shankara Bhashyam, because that is what I'm studying. So, which makes me a sort of a person who can speak about such things. Right? So, this is just one. So, the Vedas and Vaidika is just one side. There's another side that I'll just touch upon, but I'm not going to go too deep because the possibility of misuse of that knowledge is much, much greater than one would have you believe, right? So I'm just going to touch upon it. I'm going to be very cryptic on purpose because I don't want to be the reason that certain people go astray, right? The reason I'm talking about all of this is because I'm going to start talking about tantras, right? Now, apart from the Vedas, there's this other entire tradition in India. They're called the Agamas. Now, until recently, I did not know that the Agamas were also Vaishnava in nature. I primarily thought that they were Shaiva and Shakta, that is, regarding Lord Shiva and regarding the goddess. But it so appears that they are also Vaishnava, that is, they also contain teachings and scriptures regarding Lord Vishnu. Alright? I'm going to be primarily talking about the Shiva and Shakta Tantras because that's what I have experience with and what I've learned about. Alright? So, from what I've learned, the Tantras are a record of conversations between Shiva and his consort Parvati. Generally, they were spoken in the style of student-teacher discourses with Devi voicing a doubt and Ishvara answering it. One of this is the Vijnana Bhairava Tantra, in which 112 meditations are given out to Devi. They are part of the Agamas, like I said before, and like I said, I just found out recently that there are Vaishnava Agamas and Shakta Agamas as well. Since I'm not too well versed with the rest, I'm not going to go into that in much detail. I'm just going to be talking about the basics. Alright? So generally there's the worship of Shiva and Shakti. and apparently Vishnu as well. From what I've studied, there are two paths in Tantra that you can go by. The left hand path, Kaula, or the right hand path, Samaya. In the left hand path, there is a liberal use of the 5 M's, Panchamakaras, which I'm not going to speak about because there's great potential for misuse. True seekers will find their teacher. The most extreme of the Kaula would be the Aghoras. Aghoras. The Samayas use the 5 M's symbolically, and from what I've understood, it's all about the Pancha Mahabhuta. Okay, the 5 great elements. Again and again, I will reiterate that I'm being cryptic on purpose. There's already a huge amount of abuse of whatever has been taught so far, especially by misinformed Westerners who have this great need to fulfill their physical desires. And I don't want to add to it in any form or any way. Alright? So, if I had to summarize the entire thing about the Tantras whilst still being cryptic, I would use the words of a Swamiji that I had met who's in this particular field and has done his entire exploration through Aghora and all of that, the left hand path and the right hand path, and has a temple actually as well recently. Yatrasti mokshaha tatra nasti bhogaha. Where you have to go for moksha, generally this is the difference between Vaidika and Tantric path. The difference between a Vaidika and a Tantric. For a Vaidika, moksha means deprivation of the world, of the worldly pleasures. I will just say that Tantra disagrees. And I will also add this note of warning. Historically, everyone who's been drawn, every sadhaka, so-called spiritual aspirant, who is drawn to Tantra for the possibilities that it offers oneself to enjoy, generally these are the people who should not be doing Tantra. And this warning has been found in pretty much every single book that I have read regarding Tantra. Those who are drawn to the Tantric path, drawn by the possibility of unabounded pleasure, are not the ones who should be following this path. Those that see it and see the perils and decide to stay away, those are the ones who might have succeeded had they tried. So with that, I'm going to end with a prayer. Om Purnamadah Purnamidam Purnat Purnamugacchate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavashishyate Om Shanti Shanti Shantihi Harihi Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha Harihi Om. So that will be it for today's podcast. I did kind of slip away. I tried to stay on script. I prepared a great deal for this one particular episode, but it does seem like it's going to be late. Like I said, I'm a little unwell, and I still decided to go ahead and do this entire thing because I made a promise, and at the very least, I can at least record on the day I said it would be out. It is going to be a day late. I do apologize for that. Anyway, this is the first in a long line of spiritual talks. I hope you have a great time. This is a new journey and I'm glad we're on it together. I will see you around. If you like this, like, comment, subscribe, leave a comment. I can see it. If you don't like it, go ahead and give it a dislike. I'm going to be unapologetic in this moving forward. I will do my best not to disparage any other communities and other religions, but I will defend myself. Anyway, thank you and goodbye.